Hi, everybody. We're back from the CU Strategy Forum. We really appreciate everybody being there. And if some of you missed it, we'll definitely get you some of the materials. We had really a great session, fantastic speaker, and it was really nice to network with everyone. We're kicking off some CU strategy roundtables. We've got a few going, and we also have podcasts. So here is some of the new CU strategy roundtable sessions, and we'll start one right now. But let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you to our CU Strategy Forum. We've been doing these once a month conversations with all the changes in our credit union industry with some of our experts out there and picking their brain and pretty much seeing what they have to say and also sharing insightful points of view from each of you. And so we're always looking at most relevant topics. I know we've had a lot about interest rates, liquidity. Those have been a lot, but also we're seeing a lot of mergers, acquisitions. Oh my goodness, the bank mergers or the bank acquisitions have been big time, leading at least the headlines and also QSO information. So things are definitely picking up. And I think that's been the hot topic of this time. So I wanted to bring in a speaker this week to talk about some of those headlines and what the trends are happening, because things are happening pretty fast. And a lot of times you get news about something and it's already taken place. And so, what's on the cutting edge of what's coming. And I was thinking, with John. John's been an expert, John Deering, for us in a lot of these topics. He works at Capstone, and he leads a lot of these change and the growth engineers. So they lead a lot of these acquisitions and so on. And he needs to know what's happening and where it's going and what the opportunities are happening, because there's definitely consolidation within the industry. And so the three topics that I said we could look at is merger trends and bank purchases, the QSO activities, and then I know everybody's talking about non-interest income replacement, and I know that's that could be a wide open thing, but there's definitely more and more compliance regulations coming down with the credit card late fees and the overdraft. We're going to need some solution to replace some of that income, or what would be the strategy there? So with that, John Deering is joining us today. So John, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Rick. Really appreciate it. And good to see some other friends on the line as well here. Yeah, as Rick said, there's a lot of moving parts in the industry these days. The community is changing left and right as other folks from outside of the credit union market come in. The non-interest income side, I weave into a lot of our QSO dialogues anyway, so that's an easy one to talk a little bit about. The acquisitions and mergers, the headline is, yeah, credit union mergers continue to happen. More and more folks are inquiring about bank acquisitions, and we'll talk a little bit about that one as well and the trend lines. And while there is, as Rick said, a lot of motion in the marketplace and a lot of press and a lot of noise, the reality is the number of transactions is not really moving the dial yet, but it's a trend that we need to keep apprised of and keep on top of and look at as appropriate strategic alternatives along the way. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But without further ado, let's see if I can pull up. Here we go. Can you see it, Rick? All right, cool. So I do have some slides to guide through. Please do, as Rick said, feel free to use the chat. We have a few kind of interactive sessions along the way here as well that we embedded in for you guys, but certainly appreciate the opportunity to join you today. So we'll start off with one. You can just put your answers and guesses in the chat, but just curious to hear your thoughts on where you think the most QSOs reside, in particular, not the states, but how many do you think are out there that have 30 or more QSOs? Just to get people interacting a little bit and starting us off here. See the interactive poll there, very good. Wow, big numbers. People are going to the high end. This is great. We should have the NCAA tournament on the side here with the predictive models on the scores per minute too, and see what we can do here. All right, wonderful. So the answer is 9. So eventually we got there with the percentages answering that way. But the good news is there's opportunity for QSOs in every state. There's nobody that's really locking down and saying no. There happens to be more in some of the states where there's more credit unions, larger credit unions, et cetera. However, there's plenty to go around. Over 1,100 or so QSOs today across the country. And we'll have a little map later to talk about that as well. The other thing that I just wanted to put as a headline, I think that the category that we've created as external growth and growth engineers is applicable in many areas that Rick talked about, and a few more that we'll touch on. But QSO and merger and M&A activity certainly are subcategories of external growth, and I hope to up your awareness and education levels today. We've been doing this a good long time, as Rick said. 19 years ago, PSU, now PSU Co-op, engaged with us to help them with their M&A programs, and we've been running in the QSO space ever since. We have been doing this for another decade on top of that, in lots of different industries across the globe. Fun things like I can talk to you about specialty chemicals, or manufactured homes, or fun things like prepared foods. But that's history at this point for John Deering. In the past decade, I've spent probably 90% of my time in the credit union community working on deals, particularly with QSOs, and today minority stakes in fintechs and the like. Rick was kind enough to have us speak last year at the Strategy Forum in California. Made a lot of new friends and building the community that way as well. And this is a great follow-up just about a year later. So I mentioned external growth where M&A fits, where QSOs fit. Usually for credit union leaders, they think about how can we put together a growth plan that involves building more digital channels, bringing more products per member, different types of objectives for the organization and their strategy plan. And then majority of it is organic. But more and more in today's credit union community, we're seeing additional pieces of that strategic plan, and that future outlook and forecasting, if you will, include things that are in the external growth. So as Rick said, we need to replace interest income, or we need to replace non-interest income that's been traditional for us. We need to figure out new ways to be more efficient. We need to figure out how to get into new geographies. We need to figure out how to add new segs. We need to figure out how to be there when folks are trying to find their next product, consumers, members, on their couch in the middle of the night. So all of those things can be done organically, but some of them can be done faster through external growth. Some of them can be done in a way that gives you immediate access to expertise. The war on talent today is massive in your space, like it is in many other industries and marketplaces. So external growth also provides some other ways, I guess, to address some of those challenges in your talent pool today. So let's talk about a couple of relevant areas of external growth. Upper right corner, just a quick example. So we work with credit unions and their QSOs to acquire private companies, as an example, for their QSO, insurance agencies, wealth management, title, analytics, collection, whatever. It doesn't matter. The process protocols are all the same. And quite frankly, they're the same as specialty chemicals and poultry. It's exactly the same. Process protocols, tools, efficiency metrics, etc. So QSO acquisitions are the top of the heap. The second one that's pretty prevalent in today's environment, and we'll talk about some of the investment funds that are out there in the industry, expanding every day. But there's a lot going on in minority interests. And oh, by the way, convertible debt as another structure item in external growth that's being utilized today by credit unions and QSOs regularly, and more regularly. The other thing that's happening in the fintech community overlapping with CUSOs and credit unions is obviously teaming up with entrepreneurs, because they can be owners of those CUSOs as well. So I just did a CUSO minute, if you will, on the flexibility of CUSOs and structuring and all the great things that credit unions can pull upon, if you will, if they expand deeper into CUSOs, be it income generation, be it usage of that income against the cap, etc. The second major category is obviously the mergers. So this is becoming more and more proactive in the community today. You know, it ebbs and flows every cycle, right? You're going to have the regulators pushing certain ones. You're going to have people doing their lunches with other CEOs routinely to try to build rapport, build relationship, be there when there's no succession plan. All that's normal. But what we're finding over the past 5 years now, I used to say 2 years, now it's the past 5 years, are more and more folks in the credit union community going out, being proactive, utilizing third parties to orchestrate opportunities in the credit union merger environment. And I put bank acquisitions, while that's a headline that Rick said as far as the topic for today, I still put it as a subset, because there are not many folks out there in your seats that are exclusively looking for bank acquisitions. It's usually an add-on or in conjunction with a merger program, or if it's a specific relationship that's known in the community and there's connections there, it makes sense. Or if there's a particular branch or network of branches where a bank is known to be leaving the area, or you proactively go ask, is the alternative to that. So I put it under M&A in general, but usually when we're talking about strategy, it's a subset, if you will, of an overall M&A program, with most of the mind share spent on mergers, a subset on acquisitions. And of course, there's also, because it's a bank acquisition, it's very different, right? There's shareholders beyond the members. There's actual folks that are going to look at the dollar value of the stock and make a decision, be it privately held community bank or all the way up the chain for the different ownership. So they're going to be looking at different things when it comes to decision making. But really what that leads to is 9 times out of 10, they're going to be in a formal auction process. So they're utilizing an investment bank to solicit offers to maximize the price and sell in a certain time frame, which is very different than what's typical, although that's changing as well on the credit union merger side. Then the third major category of external growth is collaboration and strategic partnership. Even we use strategic partnerships with the leagues as an example to get the word out on our front end external growth strategic planning. We just signed with the New England League Cooperative last year. So these lots of things that credit unions and CUSOs are doing across marketing agreements, licensing agreements, ventures, development resources. You guys were joking about Suchit and Karan at See Rise and predecessors, and then Trellance, and now moving on. I mean, there's a lot going on in the development area, software development and integrations in the credit union community today, and across FIs, right? Not just the credit union community, where fintechs are trying to sell into credit unions. They can't connect to the core, or they're looking for a pilot to connect to the core, a pilot with a credit union or two to get it going. So there's a lot going on in development resources, and typically trying to bypass the big negotiations with some of the larger vendors in your system, so to speak. So there's a lot going on in all three of those categories: CUSOs, M&A, and collaborations today. So a few other things that are going on that we're hearing about. I mentioned the word proactive. So lots of proactive activity with CUSOs attempting to merge together, proactive activity with changes of ownership, multi-owned CUSOs. So we're getting calls daily, had 3 this week already, that, credit CUSOs that have multi-owned cap tables, if you will, where they want to shift. Some credit unions leaving, want new ones coming in, either for growth capital or change of strategic direction, or whatever the case may be. So, that's happening more and more every day as people kind of recalibrate what they're involved in at the credit unions and what they're going to be proactively involved in moving forward. And sometimes they can take some chips off the table of one QSO and double down on another, or whatever the case may be. Solve for liquidity issues that way, all sorts of stuff. So divesting and selling and exiting positions and things is becoming more and more the norm in the QSO space and credit union space. New organizations. I don't know. I think I used this example last year, but it's still relevant. Compliance costs that Rick mentioned earlier. There's 3 new compliance QSOs that stood up in the past, not too long into the past, right? There's new HR, new Medicare QSO, all sorts of new QSOs standing up to service new member needs, or needs that have always been there, but how can a credit union actually get some non-interest income from doing more with that member through their QSO? So there's lots of new initiatives that are out there. And in the upper right-hand corner for resources for folks that are not experienced in the QSO world, and the QSO is the National Association of QSOs. Messick and Lauer is the #1 law firm out there that does QSO setup and transactions. And so then we move down into other QSOs that are doing interesting things out there that we've worked with. I mentioned acquisition programs. People are investing minority stakes in different QSOs and fintechs to make them a QSO. As soon as a credit union puts $1 in a QSO in one form or fashion, it becomes a QSO into a fintech or a startup. Becomes a QSO. More and more deal advisory calls that we're getting. And what do I mean by that? That means credit union leaders have started transaction discussions, or QSO leaders have started transaction discussions and then hit either a roadblock on valuation, or a roadblock on deal terms, or a roadblock on board members or brand or whatever, and they need somebody to parachute in and do that. So that's happening more and more out there as people see that there's less and less opportunity for credit union mergers, right? There's a saturated market, mature market. So they're trying to figure out different approaches, different ways to get what they want. So that leads to a lot of deal advisory for folks like third parties like us. Valuation, left and right, we're doing valuation for different things, for different credit unions that are in and out of QSO. So that's kind of a synopsis of what we're experiencing as trends of things people are asking for in the credit union community. So let's go big picture real quick here. People always talk about, going from 10,000 or 12,000 credit unions down to 5,000 or 4,800, wherever we are right now. But I still like the global stuff, and it gets people thinking bigger. We got almost 83,000 credit unions around the globe, and it's touches over 403 million members as well, which is kind of interesting. So that's just stats. I like stats. I like figures. But it also kind of step back when you're working through challenges, right, at your credit union, what's right in front of you. It's interesting to take a look at the big picture. And also, by the way, I find it really interesting when we're facilitating strategy sessions for credit unions to bring in some of the interesting things that are going on with FIs around the world, as opposed to just what's happening in the next county over. This one's not a surprise to anybody. However, you can see swiftly by these graphics, how important digital and mobile's become. No shock there. But it does point to the overriding concern that we hear from credit union leaders beyond, fraud keeping them up at night and cybersecurity keeping them up at night. What else is keeping them up at night is where, their best members are getting cherry picked, and where are they going to get their next blend of members, right? So, this points to that. So how do you address that? QSOs can help with that, is my message. Scale, of course, there are people out there that are, in the investment banking community, in the credit union space, that are out there pushing scale. My perspective is, yes, helpful, not for everybody, but it is what it is. There's more and more merger acquisition activity, AI, crypto, green lending, different types of lending projects and products out there, all sorts of interesting things that folks in your seats are grappling with. I like this one because of the recent AI discussions that are out in the media 24/7. Used to have a different output here, which was Pokemon Go was my number one on how they got to 100 million users globally really swiftly. But ChatGPT and AI is all the talk these days. So 2 months to get to 100 million users, which is just absolutely mind-boggling. But it's out there, and sooner or later you're going to see more and more activity in and around this if it's not already at your doorstep at your credit union. But people, your members, your potential members, are utilizing all of these things that are on this page, and they will be using more. We don't know what the next one is, but they will be using more. So you always have to keep an eye out for what's coming down the pike. So here's the slide on decline, right? 4% every year. We're down to 4,702 apparently, according to one of my analysts this morning that updated this. And it's going to continue. Obviously, as the base gets lower, it's not going to continue at the same rate. It's not humanly possible for that to happen unless a lot go under overnight. But the rate will continue. I guess the way to think about it, the way it's been described to me, is one goes away every business day of the year on average. So why are people doing this? Can't handle the evolving needs that we just walked through, right? More dollars spent on digital, more need for experts that are technically inclined. Those people are high dollar people, right? You can't hire them all. So you got to find another mousetrap, compliance costs, et cetera, that Rick started with. Board member replacement, succession of CEOs, liquidity, other neobanks coming in, blah, blah, blah. A whole laundry list of why, somebody might consider it. But the reality is there's lots of other alternatives. And, I think that mergers, from my perspective, allow you to access a lot of new members really fast. Mergers allow you to access talent really fast. Those are my top two reasons that I think it's, driving forces in today's environment. And oh, by the way, I guess tied to new members is entering new communities, right? It's a distribution play as well, which you could also argue that a bank branch acquisition is the same darn thing. If it's in a new community, a new market, overnight you have a presence there and you have people there to service more people. So there's lots of good reasons why to do it. And there's also lots of financial issues that are out there that you guys live and breathe every day. So this is an interesting one because it shows the increase from 84 million to 137 million in credit union members here in the US on the top slide, while the decline in the number of credit unions has gone down precipitously. But what's interesting here is another thing, and that is community banks, same exact trend line, almost the exact same numbers. It's amazing to me, almost the exact same numbers. So where does that lead you? That leads larger banks with less people to buy in the community space. That leaves you, credit union leaders, less credit unions to merge with. So it's becoming more and more and more mature, okay? And what happens in a mature market? What happens in a mature market is margins go down because there's less competition. What happens in a mature market? People need to figure out what the definition of their next chapter is to open up new growth pathways. So that's kind of where we are right now. So this on the bottom here is an interesting one to combo with the prior slide that talks about membership growth. Yes, at an aggregate, membership in your community is growing. However, the larger guys are getting bigger, okay? The rest is red, okay? So typically when we do this type of analysis, it's nice to say it's growing, but then you got to peel back the envelope, peel back the onion a little bit, and start to see what's behind it. Just quickly seeing, okay. All right, let's do another quick poll here. Talking about community banks and acquisitions by credit unions. What do you think are the top 2 states that were tied in recent times for credit unions acquiring banks? I know we have some educated users out there that may or may not be in some of the states noted. All right, I know some of you are just making guesses, so we'll move forward. So Georgia, Illinois is the correct answer. So once again, this is a brilliant group. We're 2 for 2. You guys, as a group, have nailed it so far. Excellent. Appreciate your participation. All right, so here are the stats. I said at the onset, after Rick had kindly introduced me, that agreed with him that there was a lot of press about it, right? A lot of press about it. But when we're talking about credit union mergers at 200 to 300 a year, and we're talking about community banks coming together with another bank, 200 to 300 a year, this is a very small axis of 0 to 16, right? So very, very few deals getting done. More and more announced this year in the first quarter. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. It's becoming more and more. What's also becoming more prevalent out there is more of the rhetoric and the anti-bank credit union deals. So some states are just saying nope. So you're not going to see any. Other communities, it's going to be more prevalent. Obviously, this, as I said earlier, it comes down to dollars typically. Yes, there's a laundry list of things. For example, anytime that we're making a pitch for a credit union to acquire a bank, we're going to talk about the level of service, the great product breadth. We're going to talk about taking care of the communities, going deeper in the communities. We're going to be talking about wherewithal. We're going to be talking about longevity, all the great things that make credit unions fabulous. However, in the end, those investment bankers that are auctioning off the banks are going to have a matrix of all the bidders, and they're going to have the first line is price. And your price doesn't stack up. The rest is going to not be counted as much in most cases. In most cases, you want to try to get in there early before they do an auction is the #1 lesson on the board. So why we touched on this earlier, a couple things: financial expansion, saturated markets. We had someone tell us last month, well, no one will merge with me, so we're going to go look at banks, which is always an interesting one, to which we said, well, let's talk about how you approached it. Let's talk about your story. Let's talk about anticipating questions, being ready for the board's questions and the leadership's questions and the various stakeholders' questions. Small business lending and commercial lending expertise still, I think, is the #1 answer that we hear at Capstone, why people are considering it. Because more and more credit unions want to get into it. More and more credit unions know that they have challenges hiring a group of people. So why not do an acqui-hire and include that in the deal? In fact, we just worked with one that just basically acquired the lending team and didn't buy the bank, but got the lending team away. So that's another alternative, I suppose. As I said, regulators, some say no. Capital constraints, absolutely. Auction situations, I've talked about a couple of times, a couple of different ways where you will be typically put in a quote unquote process where you must compete against others. So with all these swirling winds and things you got to deal with, the question for some is grow or die. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I like evolve or die. Grow or die, again, it's all about, it's not necessarily exclusively about size. It's really about relevance and figuring out your unique way to thrive in the communities you serve. But in external growth, and QSOs can certainly help you recalibrate, can certainly help you define a next chapter, can certainly help you evolve with the times. So let's talk a little bit here about QSOs. For those of you who have heard me say QSOs a million times, it's a credit union service organization acronym. I do believe in my heart and soul it's the best kept secret out there for growth vehicle for credit unions. Lots of different reasons for that. Growth and efficiency are the top 2 answers on the board on why folks want to get it. Growth of X, growth of Y, to be determined or to be defined for your own organization. But they also help with efficiency and cost. What I mean by that, it can be an aggregation play where you and 5 credit unions come together and use that buying power, or you leverage, for example, the legal team or the compliance team or the HR team across multiple organizations, be it wholly owned or multi-owned. In that case, they can go either way. You do need to adhere to the majority served rule for CUSOs to get involved and stay involved, meaning that you must, majority of the business and folks served must be in the credit union movement, community members, etc. There's investment cap considerations. So it could be 1%, could be 2%, depending on your situation, your charter situation. Multi-owned simply means multiple credit unions are involved in the ownership, where wholly owned would be one credit union owning 100% of the CUSO subsidiary. So a couple of non-interest income generating examples that I was thinking about with Rick's setup there. The first is I'll just talk about insurance CUSO as a way to generate non-interest income. Last year we helped South Carolina Fed's CUSO holding group acquire another insurance company as they entered a new geographic community in Charleston, or I'm sorry, out of Charleston. This was up in Greenville market. So what they wanted, they were already doing insurance, and they were going to merge with another credit union. And their philosophy and model is, once I merge in another credit union, I want to make sure I have the expertise and the ancillary services to service the member. So they engaged with us to go find a private insurance agency that does P&C insurance in that local market. So that's the first example, and that's off and running now. Another one that's out there in the press, most of our work isn't out in the press, but another one that is out in the press is our work with Renify, which is now a CUSO. They do renovation finance lending, and they have an interesting platform there. And among others, Arden Credit Union up in Philadelphia has partnered with them to be part of their concierge service, as they call it, allowing not only more loans, but also getting deeper with member service and breadth of service for their members as they continue to expand. Let's do another question here. Which state has the most CUSOs? I gave you a hint earlier in one of my remarks. 4 states to choose from. Got it. Different regions of the country represented on the list. Thank you, thank you. Playing along here. All right, looks like California has stayed in the lead, and the answer is actually Texas. But California is indeed in the top 3. So they are third. But Texas has a margin of 15 over California at this stage of the game. But CUSOs are all over the country, and they continue to increase. Like I said earlier, 1,100, almost 1,200 is my guess for the end of this year, as there are more CUSOs firing up every week, which will be an interesting dynamic, right? Less credit unions to serve, more CUSOs. So we will see where that one lands here in the coming years as that trend line continues. Here are some of the largest areas of service for CUSOs. Lending's the #1. Investments, we do a lot of work in investments, payments, member service, operations. IT is another, obviously, generic category that captures a lot of things that's being, that you're purchasing from CUSOs or have an alternative to purchase from CUSOs. Other areas of interest, I would say, in up and coming are things like analytics, are things like HR, healthcare. We see a lot of activity in various lending categories. So obviously lending can be sliced and diced into, participations now, commercial, consumer, servicing or booking, or just member acquisition is another one that's hot and heavy right now, obviously. Two other partnering examples in the QSO community. PSU, as I said, was our first QSO client many moons ago. Helped them acquire real-time payments player Juniper. They've invested in Amount. Pure IT is another long-term client that we've helped them do about 4 or 5 transactions, but the latest was they acquired some tech and people from Kiva Group to work on integration challenges, and that resulted in Jamesy, a new QSO that started 1.5 years ago. So they're doing some interesting things out there in the community as well, trying to address all these new fintechs coming in and needing access and the ability to communicate across the various integration and cores that are out there. So lots and lots and lots of activity, whether you know it or not, that are going on out there in the partnering arena and investment world by credit unions and for credit unions and for the members ultimately. But you have a lot of decisions. One of them is, do I build it? Do I partner? Do I buy? Do I collaborate in a QSO? I said earlier that it's the greatest vehicle that's available to you for growth, but it's also a great vehicle for sharing risk, because some folks are, some QSOs exist in order to share risk, in order to mitigate risk, in order to bring costs down, as I said, for shared purchasing, if you will. There's a chat question about where to go for QSOs. I would start with NACUSO, NACUSO. They have a variety of resources on their website. They also have what I would classify as kind of words escaping me at the moment, encyclopedia of QSOs, categories of QSOs, etc. Happy to send the link out to folks as well. The other thing to think about when you're evaluating all these external growth options, the mergers, acquisitions, and QSOs, with all the evolving things that we alluded to earlier in the marketplace, you also have an opportunity through QSOs to learn. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Not just you learn, but people on the team at the credit unions have a massive opportunity to learn through the QSO, be part of the QSO, sit on the boards of the QSO if you invest meaningfully, learn from the other participants in the QSO, learn from all the things that they're putting toward understanding members better, members' need. So there's a whole host of collaboration opportunities where the credit unions that we've worked with that are looking at QSOs or thinking about QSOs are really upping the game and giving new professional development opportunities to people on their team. Non-interest income, that's probably should be the first answer. Used to be new technology, better technology, given what's going on, but I might flip-flop the first two at this stage of the game. I'm not big on keeping up with competitors. I like to figure out how to differentiate from competitors. So again, it's a matter of where you can't be everything to everybody, as you know, but where you can be the best, that's where you can spend your energy and do good things out there in the communities that you serve. The last one is fairly new in the community, right? I alluded to earlier that there's some investment funds that are out there now. We'll talk about some of that in a moment. But return on investment is kind of a new thing for QSOs, where people are investing in them with the hope and dream, in some cases, that they're going to make a lot of money for their institution when the organizations exit. So external growth, the major options for you are wholly owned QSO, minority stakes, venturing with folks. But the good news is any of these are available to you as QSO and credit union leaders, rather. You can do any of these things. We're seeing more and more actual licensing. Think about the spot transaction and low degree of control, your current process when you're doing RFPs or you're selecting a vendor, right? That would put you on the left side. As you get deeper in with a partner, you're going to get deeper in potentially and evaluate actual dollars changing hands. Or in the case of a venture, you're both contributing something. So, for example, we were just involved in one where a credit union was contributing office space. They were contributing IT services and acumen, whereas the other partners' contributions were humans, and they were contributing non-human element to the venture. And you both have to figure out and agree, right, what those things are worth over time, today and tomorrow, and 3 years down the line, potentially, as you reevaluate and grow. So let's touch quickly on funds. And what do I mean by that? So the most known one out there today, maybe not the most known, one that's getting a lot of publicity and out there promoting is Circle. Some of you I know are investing in Circle already. So they're now seeking investment and commitments and rounding that out for Circle Fund number 2. So this is actually started a couple of years ago. It is the first of its kind, where they're putting together, they have a team of credit union folk, investment professionals, and they've put together and raised millions and millions of dollars, 240 or something like that, $1 million to put to work from credit unions in the fintech investment community. So they're buying a bunch of minority stakes in companies, and ultimately they will exit some of them, right? They've exited one so far, and now they're in the midst of raising their second fund. So they've have a second part of their model, which is a subscription model, where you gain access to their review of all the fintechs that they've looked at as well. TrueStage, the new CUNA Mutual Venture Group, now TrueStage Ventures, has been around for a long time. But unlike Circle, which is investing a lot of different credit unions' money into investments, into lots of different investments, TrueStage is putting their own money to work primarily. So they have the same investment professionals that work for TrueStage as work for TrueStage Ventures, and they have their own fund that they're putting to work in similar, I would say, similar type companies to Circle, just not with credit union money, but for the credit union community. They've also fired up a new venture discovery fund to go downstream into smaller organizations, and also some of the diversity areas that are trending these days that have a lot of opportunity, quite frankly, in the credit union community. So they've dedicated resources to that initiative as well. Another one that's fairly new, that is just starting up directly in the credit union community. They have done funds in the past under different names, but now they're doing it specifically in the credit union community, is Black Dragon. So they also, you might recognize, at least I recognize a few of the logos that they've invested in with Open Bank Solutions and Payveris in particular. But they're another one that's now following TrueStage and Circle and doing some interesting things in the marketplace. I used to say that the credit union community was a sheltered market. No longer. It started with the private equity groups buying up all the LOS systems, and then going public. Then you had the all sorts of the processors coming together globally, and then the floodgates have opened since then. So it's not just the vendors anymore that you're used to. There's lots of other people. Another interesting example that's not a fund you can invest in, but it's an example for credit unions, because Michigan State University Federal Credit Union started a holding company called Reseda Group, and they are also doing things similar to what I described as Circle, taking minority stakes in a lot of different companies that they think are going to move the dial for not just their credit union, but also other credit unions. They're also co-investing with some of the aforementioned investor groups as well. So that's another trend line that I see continuing. And I say see continuing because there are at least 5 others that we're working with that are doing the same darn thing. So there's that. It used to be 1% of the community and the credit unions getting involved in this. Now we're probably up to 5% of the community doing this kind of thing. And soon enough, it'll be at 12%. So because it's expanding rapidly. BankTech Ventures, not a credit union group, to be clear. However, every credit union event I go to, they're there. And why are they there? Sourcing deals with the fintechs that are buddying up with credit unions and servicing credit unions, and good group. But they're a professionally managed venture fund group, good folks, and I expect you will see their name in some of the investments in some of your vendors here real soon. So you as leaders need to think about a few things, right? When you think about CUSOs, you think about control, influence, you think about risk, you think about taxes, you think about a lot of different things. And the alternative is give your money to somebody else to invest, right? If you have that, then there's the old portfolio theory 101, where you're doing a lot of things. So no one thing is going to lose all the money, right? So we have clients that are putting their smaller slices of a larger pie, I guess is the way I will describe it. There are lots of other educational opportunities. Obviously, in 45 minutes here, we just scratched the surface on a lot of different things. We have the CUSO Corner and M&A Minute that we put out regularly. We try to do webinars with on relevant topics for folks like yourself that are looking to expand through M&A. The CUSOs conference is coming up in Orlando for CUSOs. Still time to get there. CU Conferences does a CUSO conference every December down at St. Pete Beach, which is a good one for learning purposes if you want to spend a couple days there. So lots of educational opportunities. There's, we've tracked these long and hard for, as far as the outside organizations. This particular opportunity that Rick's put together is fabulous to share ideas, get insights from outside parties. But if anybody ever wants to use me as a sounding board to get other ideas on where to go, let me know. Happy to share. We feel that our process, as I said earlier, is applicable in a lot of different scenarios, definitely CUSOs, bank acquisitions, merger, proactive mergers anyway. So this is our process we've honed over the last 3 decades and use it routinely in your space. First strategy first, then relationships, and then you get to the sexy deal part, but don't skip to the sexy deal part before you do your homework. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's my first bullet here. Strategy first. Don't jump in. Use a process, use tools, maintain objectivity no matter what external growth initiative you go after, minority investments, mergers. This stuff's fun. I'm passionate about it. Happy to talk to anybody about anything at any time. Here's a few of the live things that may get your get 1 or 2 of them might get you interested in having a dialogue. These are some of the things that we're involved in, at least for working with credit unions. And yeah, a lot of hot topics there. Happy to talk and answer questions. Thanks, Rick.
Absolutely. I have a question from the floor. Jennifer writes, as a definition, like in Reseda, if they're invested by a CUSO fund, are they in by definition a CUSO as well? So they don't have any credit unions directly invested in the company, but just the investment fund. Is it still a CUSO?
Yeah, like if Circle or Reseda puts money into a company, then it's a CUSO. Yes, and they would have CUSO regulations. There are a few states, however, I can count them on less than one hand, 3. There are states that allow direct investment without the CUSO rules, but not too many of them.
That's good. One thing I've noticed is Mark Treichel mentioned in his recent podcast that NCUA is going to start doing separate compliance exams going on. So I can imagine that that's probably going to spark, and I think you even mentioned, are compliance CUSOs something out there? Because I think if you're a mid-sized credit union like us, that's always a difficult challenge.
Yeah, so part 2 of that is absolutely there are compliance CUSOs, mostly started by the legal folks, right? That are, but also some of the leagues and associations have compliance offerings as well. So there are several of those that are not considered CUSOs, but they're in the community and offer those services on an aggregate basis. Your question about more and more oversight, if you will. A few years ago, the NCUA started to require which is why I have the table or the chart I had over there on number of QSOs. They started to require formal indications of QSO investments, right? And each QSO now needs to submit. So it's coming, Rick. It's not yet there as far as equal footing with audits of credit unions, but I can assure you that depending on the level of investment a particular credit union is doing in QSOs, there are going to be more scrutiny on that individual credit union, yes. So a few hints there. One is make sure you document the rationale up front, make sure you have an exit plan documented, make sure you have clear minutes, make sure you have all the decision-making channels and protocols documented before you make that investment, et cetera. So when those auditors come knocking, you have all of that, your ducks in a row. But as far as NCUA coming in and looking at QSO specific information, it's going to be, yeah, that's a chapter on the journey that's forthcoming is my expectation.
Yep. Any questions from the floor out there? I guess Frank has a question. Is that a disincentive and better to just be a cooperative like Trellance?
Well, Trellance would fall under that just because they're a multi-owned QSO, right? So they're going to have the same scrutiny as another multi-owned QSO. Again, perhaps girth, size, diversity of investments that they're doing will make a difference. But you know, any QSO is a cooperative, to be clear on that. It's either a wholly owned subsidiary of the one credit union that started them, or it's at the other end of the spectrum, somebody like, you know, a PSU or a co-op that has hundreds and thousands of credit union member owners, and Trellance is in between, right? Because of legacy owners through their product that they offered. But the oversight is, my point is that until a few years ago, QSOs didn't have to register. Now they have to register. So the common belief out there is that now that they must all register, be it a $100,000 in revenue compliance QSO that just started outside of one credit union in, you know, pick your state, or a, you know, $1 billion QSO, they all need to submit now. And so that will yield more oversight in the not too distant future.
I know we have a number of credit unions on here that haven't really dove too deep into the world of QSOs. If you were a credit union CEO and you weren't really involved in any QSO except maybe, you know, some of the generic ones like co-op or something like that, where would you start to look at to solve a problem? What problem do you think that QSOs have the highest success in solving for the credit unions?
Whoa, that's yeah, tough to answer that one on a generic basis, Rick, because every credit union's got a different set of challenges. But I guess I'll start with one of my slides where I said, you know, the number one answer on the board is how do we solve for technology challenges, right? Be it personnel related, or how do we solve for expertise in a particular new product set that is more digitally focused than it was 10 years ago, right? There are QSOs and experts out there that you can share and collaborate to solve some of those riddles. The second answer could be lending, right? There, you know, with interest rates fluctuations, everybody has been around for a cycle or two knows that there's debates at credit unions that handle all their origination, servicing, et cetera, in-house. And then the market turns and they wonder, why do I have all these people on my team? Maybe if I had outsourced that, I wouldn't have to have a challenge with HR and considerations on holding on to good folks through these hard times. If you had a QSO that you were utilizing For example, for lending, the CUSO would hopefully be servicing 5, 6, 100 credit unions, and they would have the ability to handle some of that in a better way than a one-off credit union or an individual credit union could. So those are a couple of examples that I've seen be very, very advantageous, Rick. Yes, you can get the deck, no problem sharing that. Just looking at the chat here.
And in the last 90 days, what's the number one request that you've been having or that you see most common from credit unions?
Well, let's see. I think the number one answer on that one's going to have to be, can you help us merge with another credit union? That's not necessarily the number one answer on the projects we take on, which is back to CUSO acquisition and investment. But we have lots of people in the community sending us referrals right now on helping credit unions merge, Rick.
So in that case, they're contacting you because they found a partner, but they don't know how to get it done or get it navigated, or that they're actually searching for a partner, or both?
3 categories. First is, unfortunately, folks that haven't done their don't have their ducks in a row, and they've been approached by someone else. So they swiftly need to figure out what to do with that inquiry, which means board alignment is the first thing we got to grapple with there. How do you anticipate what to do, what to say, what not to say, what that journey should look like, what questions to ask, etc. The second category is, as you said, being more proactive with all the changes of leadership at credit unions these days. There are a lot of credit union CEOs that are trying to figure out and navigate a lot of things, but then they're trying to navigate, well, I've been, charged by the board to go grow through M&A. So how do I start that process? How do I execute that? How do I navigate the relationships that I don't have in this community, et cetera? And then the third is, the example you used of we've been talking for a while, right? Now's the time. We just got their Callahan's report and their numbers are in the toilet. We've been talking to them a long time, but we can't get them moving. So can you jump in and help us navigate through this one-off opportunity?
And I think, as you pointed out, there's been mergers happening for a long time, and it's really a steady case. A lot of mergers start talking about it, but then to get it finalized, there's very few that get done. It's a funneling process. Where do you think are some of the biggest breakdowns? And if credit unions ever want to either pursue one, where do you think that they need to spend the time with? Because these are the easiest fail points.
Great set of questions. The first answer is, I'll go back to what I said a minute ago. Alignment with the board is the biggest failure point. Again, it's everybody wants to lead the deal, do a deal, get the deal moving. And sometimes folks get ahead of themselves and they don't necessarily have the appropriate sandbox, if you will, defined with their board. And that could be on the being a surviving entity or one that's not going to be the surviving entity. In both cases, you need to be in absolute lock and step with your board. If that's not signed, sealed, and delivered, if you will, internally in your 4 walls, then there's no reason to hunt for somebody else, Rick. So a lot of people waste a lot of time and bang their head against the wall and say, why did I just spend 9 months of my life doing that? Right? You want to try to avoid that at all costs. The second major failure point, I think, is not having your ducks in a row in another category, and that is anticipating the questions that I said early in my presentation, anticipating the questions you're going to get from the other side being board members or leaders of the other credit union. So you need to have the frequently asked questions listed out, figure out what you're going to say, because you don't want to look like a deer in the headlights, taking the bad, worst case example, but flipping it on its head, you want to be proactive about certain things, right? So when you hear somebody on the other side, this is negotiation point 101, but consultative selling, if you will, you want to make sure you're being a good listener and then play back to them what you can actually do for them. And if you don't have that figured out ahead of time, what you can actually do or say, then you end up making either bad promises that'll come back to bite you, or you're stuck, and when they want to move forward and the momentum's building, you're not able to take advantage of that momentum and move it through the next gate, right? Because you got to go back and talk internally or go back to the board or whatever the case may be. So that's the other comment I'd make on that set of questions.
Very true. It all comes down to communication for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my passion, to be crystal clear, is utilizing QSOs for a lot of different things. I think mergers are a fabulous way for some organizations to expand and grow. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of the challenges that credit union leaders are facing in the communities and the memberships that they serve can be solved through interesting QSO opportunities. So happy to talk to folks about M&A. No doubt about it. I think we can add a lot of value on mergers and bank acquisitions, given our experience doing M&A for 30 years. But, if you're trying to solve a particular targeted riddle, back to your question, Rick, once you define what that question is you're trying to solve for, then you can figure out what the right mousetrap is and what the right structure is and what the right thing is. But until you figure out what that riddle is you're trying to solve, you're just going to be guessing which structure, which form of M&A is going to help you the best. So I like to be proactive versus reactive. We'll put it that way.
Well put. Well put. Well, I think there was a lot of great information here. Yeah, we'll go ahead and send the deck to everybody, and then you've got John's number, and if you have a follow-up question or how to get involved in the QSO or merger space or acquisitions, because I know a lot of these things aren't always published of what's happening. It's kind of like an iceberg. Only what you see is just a little bit on top of what's really happening. So I appreciate it. I know it's been a hot topic. So thank you so much, John, for joining us. And we appreciate everybody's participation in it. And thanks for the good quizzes. We did pretty good. We got 3 out of 4. We're a lot of California represented here. So our own state brought us down, I guess. And I jumped in that myself.
Hey, you're in the top 3. You're in the top 3.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Rick. Happy to chat. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.